Dr. Paul, good to be back with you on Kitco News.
Nice to be with you today.
So, Dr. Paul, I'd like to start with a commentary you recently penned regarding how the U.S. is no longer number one and why. There was a recent study in which the World Bank took part, indicating that China would soon displace the U.S. as the leading global economy. Why do you think this could happen?
Well, the tragedy is that in China, they moved in a direction of more freedom in their markets, and they followed a policy which is very capitalistic, is that they don't spend all the money they take in. They actually have savings. In contrast to what we're doing here, we're moving in the opposite direction, that not only do we spend everything that we take in, we have been taught for many, many decades that the only way to keep the economy going good is to spend money you don't have, run up deficits. Deficits don't matter, and borrowing is okay. So what we have done is become radical, total Keynesians, believing in government planning and economic intervention, where China has moved in this other direction, and from their savings, they've actually paid a benefit to us by loaning all that money back, which is a mixed bag for them as far as I'm concerned. But they actually, save enough money, they earn interest from us, and instead of running a foreign policy like we do, of spending a lot of money getting involved in wars we don't need involved in, claiming we have to protect our oil, what do they do with some of that money? They take it and invest it and deal with countries like that, and so they buy up some of these resources.
Looking at the Fed, last time we spoke was before Yellen took helm at the Fed, and you suggested that she could be dangerous for the economy. Now, what do you think of her role thus far and the scale back on the bond buying program?
Well, I think that's good, but there's a little bit of fiction there too. If they were really cutting back on monetizing debt, and she was cutting back, you'd expect interest rates to go up a little bit. But interest rates have not gone up, and even though she's cutting back the purchase of long-term bonds, she has reassured the markets, don't sweat it, folks. We're not going to let interest rates go up for another year or two or three or whatever is necessary. She revealed herself as not totally knowledgeable the other day when a member of Congress asked her at the Joint Economic Committee, how are you going to unwind this? Which is a common question that Bernanke had been asked and Yellen's been asked. But it was her tone, and yeah, I understand your worries and concern, but we at the Fed, and I'm of course paraphrasing, we know what to do, we know what we're doing, we have the tools. When the time comes, if it looks like it's overheating and prices are going up, like they're not going up right now, we know exactly what to do and we can unwind it. We're in charge, don't sweat it. Well, that's, as far as I'm concerned, pretty naive, because it isn't the brilliance of knowing how to manage the monetary policy. It's the wisdom to know that you can't manage the economy through monetary policy.
Well, that's an interesting point. I was at a recent talk by the former head of the New York Federal Reserve who suggested that, this unwinding of the bond program could be in fact a dangerous road. It's not an easy task.
Well, it isn't easy, and this is why they have to be so careful. If they wanted to unwind it, they could quit buying them completely, but they're gradually reducing them with the guarantee that they're not going to raise interest rates. See, that's a conflict. And but no, even if you put a person in that agreed with me on all the issues, the damage has already been done. The malinvestment is out there. The excessive debt is out there. So when you have this distortion, the most important thing is to recognize they've really messed up. It needs to be corrected. The market is always demanding correction, but if you prevent the correction and just give it more narcotics and more money and more credit, it doesn't help. So what you need is a total correction. The quicker the better, like the quick, snappy depression of 1921, and then it was over. But politically, nobody's going to do that.
But when you say they really messed up, you're saying we as the Fed.
Oh, the Fed has messed up, but it's a philosophy. It's the people endorse the spending. They're always going to Congress for more things. Congressmen stay in office by giving stuff to their constituents, and they've done this for decades. And wars are always good because that shows we're the good guys and we have to spread our exceptionalism. So war is good and welfare is good and we need government. Government will take care of us. So it's that philosophy where the people put certain people in office that spend the money, and then the Fed is there to accommodate. So it's a collusion of a whole entire system. So it isn't just Bernanke or Greenspan sitting there and say, I'm going to mess things up or I'm going to do things and they won't mess things up. It is this whole problem of accepting the idea of fiat money, and this, of course, is why I emphasize so much the importance of sound currencies, and that, of course, is having a gold standard.
Right. And we'll touch on gold in a second, but first, Ukraine and Russia, you've been really vocal about this subject, saying U.S. should not get involved whatsoever. Let's get your thoughts on that, Dr. Paul.
Well, I think it's a shame what we've been doing, for many, many years. Since World War II, we've been involved way too much, whether it was Korea or Vietnam or whatever. The last 10 years has gotten, much worse in getting involved too often and too carelessly with very little permission from the Congress and the people. Presidents just do this. And now here we are in Ukraine. We shouldn't be involved. We should be out of it. We don't have the money. We just make things much worse. And there's a civil war going on there. The more it's left to the Ukrainian people to sort that out, the better.
So let's talk gold now as a safe haven. I know in the past you've mentioned, look, the volatility of gold is part of its nature and to be expected. How do you see the gold market set up today?
Well, of course, the other way of looking at the volatility of the price of gold is the volatility of the dollar. Confidence in the dollar, or lack of confidence, and what people do to try to artificially make the dollar look stronger than it really is. So I think that gold wins out in the end, no matter what. Bernanke said that gold is not money. Gold is money, and they can't reverse that. And that is going to be the case. And although right now, the last year or so, gold is not soaring, but compared to what? Compared to 1971 when I got interested in gold, it's gone up a lot. And eventually people will go to gold because they will lose confidence in the dollar. And right now I think you see signs of this. The dollar index is not going up. If anything, it's slipping down. And I think that's the way it's going to continue. I think a lot of the paper money, the fiat money they've created in the last 10 years hasn't really been discounted because it's sort of sat in banks and reserves and everybody playing it safe. Nobody wants to invest. But eventually, and I think it has already starts slipping out. For instance, M1 is growing at a 17% annualized rate these past 3 months. So that's where the cash is. And if you look carefully, you'll find out there's a lot of price inflation too. If you look at some food products and medical care and education, but to go with a CPI which is rigged and say, oh, CPI, but the markets sort of respond to that. And they can do that for a while, but eventually you can't fool the markets. The markets win out, and that's why time will tell in the not too distant future when you're going to see gold much higher.
All right, Dr. Paul, finally, 2016, is Bernie Sanders the next Ron Paul?
I saw that article. That's interesting. But the one thing is Bernie and I have worked together because there are some subsidies to big corporations that he didn't like and I didn't like either. So we worked together. But, I think there was some proper analogy there that he was independent mining and appealing to a certain group. He never called himself a Democrat. Of course, he's coming from a position pretty near opposite of libertarianism. But in some ways, we had agreements, too. He wasn't gung-ho over these wars. He wasn't gung-ho over subsidies to big corporations. So progressive Democrats actually are open to coalitions and even on audit the Fed and monetary policy. I've gotten Dennis Kucinich and other, and Bernie Sanders was an ally for me on looking at the Fed. So I take my allies where I can get them, and I hope he runs, and I hope he does well in the Democratic primary.
Dr. Paul, thanks so much for your thoughts today.
Thank you.